What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, March 28th, 2017, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling our dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phones when you call on in. And yes, we've got some new equipment, so there may be some little tiny glitches, but overall things are running a lot better than they were just a short time ago. And so I want to do a little tip of the hat, if I actually owned a hat, to our hardworking technical crew there in our control room, Mike, obviously, and Dan, and the rest of the gang. They're dealing with very antiquated equipment, and they've replaced it with not quite so antiquated equipment, and just trying to stay on the air any way that we can. All righty, getting into the news here, Obamagate is beginning to definitely show signs. It is going into an ugly, ugly scandal. Devin Nunes has confirmed that the Obama administration used intelligence information gathered on Donald Trump and his people for political opposition. And this is coming out of Bloomberg, and basically saying that all of this intelligence information, which was being sheet-dipped as an investigation into Russia, was going to the White House, and from there it was finding its way to whoever was opposed to Donald Trump, which appears to be pretty much the entire government right now. And because of that, now all of a sudden there's a huge outcry in the Congress. Devin Nunes should recuse himself from the Russia probe because he doesn't believe, as we do, that Donald Trump and Russia are in cahoots together. We only want somebody who has already convicted Donald Trump in his mind to be in charge of all these investigations. And there really is a panic going on out there. Chuck Schumer is out there demanding that Nunes step down. And, of course, Nunes says, I'm not going anywhere. And the big stink they're making is that Nunes met a source over at the White House. Oh, my goodness, the head of an investigation can't talk to the office of the president. Oh, that's horrible. No, actually what's going on is very simple. Nunes needed to review some documents that are only available on the executive branch's intranet. And just like other aspects of the government, there are private computer networks that are not available to the general internet. So the only way he could look at the documents, he had to go over to the White House and use one of their computers on their network to review the documents. That's it. That's what happened. And they're trying to turn this into the, oh my goodness, he's a traitor to the cause, which I'm sure from the point of view of Hillary's supporters is absolutely true, because anybody who is not pushing to remove Trump and install Empress Hillary I obviously is a traitor to the cause here. And a lot of people are beginning to realize, like this article over at RINF.com, in any semblance of bipartisanship on these intelligence committees has evaporated. It's turning into just another faction fight along party lines, and now, instead of actually investigating, what they're trying to do is pick off the GOP leadership, or indeed any leadership of these committees, who might be inclined to actually look at the facts rather than go along with the propaganda scree that Donald Trump is the Moscow candidate. Insert ominous music here. Now, further embarrassing the situation, Evelyn Farkas is an Obama administration insider. She's the latest Democrat to roll over, and she told MSNBC, yes, they were spying on Donald Trump, and she was helping the Obama administration spy on Trump, and that Trump, and not the Russians, was the target of all this illegal surveillance. The idea of we're investigating Russia, that was a cover story to try and make it seem quasi-legal and justifiable. And she's out there. This is an Obama insider saying, no, they had nothing to do with Russia. It was all about bugging Trump. Now, at this point, they've pretty much confirmed that the Obama administration was spying on Donald Trump during the transition, trying to get information on how to get people to prepare to push back against Donald Trump following the inauguration. The open question is how much spying was going on before the election to try and damage Donald Trump, help Hillary Clinton. That needs to be looked at. Now, as you know, the director of the FBI, James Comey, and the director of the National Security Agency, or as they like to call themselves, no such agency, Rogers, didn't show up today for their classified hearing. And this is absolutely insane. They have been called to testify in closed-door session where they're allowed to talk about classified information. They just didn't show up. They did not show up at all. Gee, I wonder if they have something to hide. They certainly act like it, don't they? They certainly act like there is something being hidden here. They're almost as totally wacko paranoid as the Israelis are about the history of World War II. Don't look at the facts, don't ask questions, don't analyze, don't think, just believe as we tell you to believe, and all will be well. Now, Chaffetz is out there saying that their investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server is being hindered by the State Department. So we can see, without even knowing what the big, ugly secret is, we know there's a big, ugly secret in there. Everybody is linking arms and joining forces, trying to basically keep the curtain drawn before you, the American people, because you're not supposed to know what the government is doing with your votes and with your money. Your job is just to sit there and work and give us wealth and breed new workers and soldiers and otherwise sit down and shut up, because that's the United States of fascist America today. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. Now, Donald Trump has posed a very reasonable question. Why aren't these intelligence committees probing the Clintons? Because there's a lot more evidence of wrongdoing regarding the Clintons than there is about Donald Trump. And there's very clearly a bias going on here. What about the Hillary Clinton deal that allowed big uranium to go to Russia? Bill Clinton's money for Russian speeches, money to the Bill and Hillary Russian reset, Podesta's Russian company. There's a lot of stuff out there. Huge money went into the Clinton Foundation, in particular connected to the Uranium One deal. $5 million to Podesta's brother. No investigation there. Now, John Podesta, former head of Hillary Clinton's campaign, is facing prison because he broke federal law by concealing the fact that he owned tens of thousands of shares in a Russian bank. It was supposed to be on his financial disclosure forms. He did not disclose. He's hiding his own Russian connections. The Intelligence Committee ought to be looking at that. Now, John Podesta's brother, Tony, made $500,000 lobbying for a Chinese firm convicted of illegal arms sales to Iran. Why aren't they investigating that? The Podesta Group is up to their neck in all of this stuff. And Tony Podesta failed to register as a foreign agent when he represented a bank with ties to Russian spy agencies. That's where the dirt is, not Donald Trump, not Vladimir Putin. And the dirt is trying to protect itself. Don't look at us. Look at him. Hurt him. Don't go away from us here. Now, there's a very alarming article coming out of RINF.com, and normally I would have passed it over, except we're seeing a ramp-up of these staged booga-booga terrorist attacks. We're seeing a ramp-up of intrusions into the White House. And according to this article over in RINF.com, the deep state may be getting ready to implement what's called the Continuity of Government Plan. Now, this is a plan where the event of some kind of a catastrophe, the automated dictatorship takes on over, Congress gets sent home on vacation, and they basically run the country as a dictatorship for the duration of the national emergency, which will turn out, of course, to be, decades and decades and decades. And they're still out there pushing Russian hacking and so forth and so on. There's been another break-in, well, not break-in, but another incident at the White House. And apparently there was a man who claimed he had a bomb in a bag carrying outside the White House. The Secret Service did a lockdown on the White House. They took the man into custody. Apparently whatever was in the bag wasn't explosive, and the lockdown has been lifted. But we're seeing this, all these people getting into the White House, crawling over the fence like they're trying to get us used to the idea that Trump is vulnerable. Now, California's Congresswoman Maxine Waters is out there just screaming, we have to impeach Donald Trump. And she's got a long list of reasons. She's out there saying that Trump should be impeached because Putin supplied the bombs for Aleppo that killed children. That actually happened under Obama. Then Waters says Trump should be impeached because Russia hacked the DNC and exposed all the Democrats' lies. It's a bit of a reach there to say Trump had anything to do with that. And the most insane thing she is saying is Trump should be impeached because Putin invaded Korea. I'm sorry, Maxine, Putin has not invaded Korea. He's not even gotten close to Korea. But this seems to be what passes for politicians coming out of California. Maxine Waters, along with Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi. The other day I was talking about this possibility that the United States, because of prescription pharmaceuticals, was literally drugging itself into mental illness. And I think these three ladies are a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And they're not the only ones. Apparently Chuck Schumer was at a restaurant and all of a sudden took issue with the fact that one of the other restaurant patrons was a Trump supporter and literally went out over and launched into a tirade. How could you support Trump? He's a liar. He's a liar. She voted for Trump. And, you know, the argument went outside. And this guy just kept screaming at these people. They were just there for a dinner. And Schumer just launched on them. The government is dysfunctional. This kind of fanatical hysteria is a prelude to outright civil war. Now, a little bit of good news. As you know, I'm a big fan of Judge Napolitano, and he was recently pulled off from Fox News for the ultimate crime in the corporate media's eyes, which is telling the truth. And apparently, he has now been notified that he is on Donald Trump's list of potential Supreme Court nominees. If Gorsuch is not confirmed, and the Democrats are fighting back just over the turf war. Remember, when Gorsuch went up for his federal judgeship, not a single Democrat opposed him. But because he's Trump's nominee, they're fighting it tooth and nail. They're threatening filibusters. They're behaving like children. And if they succeed in blocking Gorsuch, they could wind up with Napolitano. I'd like to see Judge Napolitano on the Supreme Court. I really would. I really would here. Now, let's turn over to... Okay, we just lost our connection from RBN, and I don't know why. I don't know why we did. There we go. And we're back on the air, I assume, here. All right, so getting over to the war zones. Peace is returning to the streets of Aleppo finally. It may be one of the only quiet places left in Syria right now, but it's been pretty much devastated. People who had been to Aleppo before this U.S. attempt to oust Bashar al-Assad, remember, it was all olive groves, orange gardens, and just a beautiful, beautiful place. And now it's just been devastated. It looks like an aftermath of a war, as well it should. Meanwhile, up in the north of Syria, ISIS is counterattacking, trying to defend one of their last Syria strongholds. And we have Rex Tillerson is once more out there talking about the need to establish safe zones in Syria. And I expect that those safe zones are right along that edge where the U.S. wants to carve off a piece of Syria for the eventual Kurdistan. And at this point, given the cost to get here, it's hard to see what benefit a new Kurdistan is going to create other than to continue the policy of breaking up all the big nations in the Middle East into little nations that are easier to push around and bully. But they're back to this idea of safe zones. And little important point here, the United Nations is not talking about safe zones. Congress has not given Trump a declaration of war in Syria. And certainly Bashar al-Assad does not want the U.S. forces in there as well. This is an illegal war. This is naked aggression, and the U.S. is ramping things up again. They're sending hundreds of paratroopers into Mosul, down in Iraq, ramping up over there. And apparently Amnesty International is out there with an accusation that the hundreds of Mosul civilians, something like 200, killed in the last U.S. airstrike, were apparently told not to flee by authorities. They were told, stay there, get in this building, you'll be safe there. And apparently somebody messed up because that was the building the U.S. forces struck. Huge amounts of civilian deaths. And it's amazing to see the corporate media just crying all their crocodile tears for these people who were killed near Parliament, and then having absolutely no concern about the hundreds who are being killed in all these war zones. And we're not talking hundreds of soldiers, we're talking civilians. Men, women, and children who are not part of the armed forces of that nation. These are war crimes. And apparently Amnesty International is also saying there's an alarming pattern in the U.S.-led strikes in Iraq, where there appears to be a complete disregard for the possibility of civilian casualties. Over in Yemen, hundreds of thousands have risen up against the Saudi-U.S. invasion. The people of Yemen want to be in charge of the country of Yemen. The U.S. went in some years back, did a regime change. The people of Yemen did not like life under their foreign puppet rulers. They kicked the foreign puppet rulers out, and now the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are going back in with the internationally approved government to install. Now, little point of international law. Nowhere is a country allowed under any kind of international law or the UN Charter to decide what government another nation will have. In fact, if anything, the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights says everybody has a right to self-determination. Everybody has a right to have the government they choose to have. This label, the internationally approved government, is a hoax. It's a fraud. It's to try and make it look like there is some legitimacy to this imposed puppet ruler government that is being forced on the people of Yemen at the point of a bayonet. And there isn't any. There is no legal justification for it whatsoever. So far, more than 1,500 children have been killed in Yemen's war as it enters its third year. More than 10,000 people have been killed in the fighting, many of them civilians. This is all coming out of UNICEF. 2,400 children have been injured seriously. And of course, they're dealing with this major famine over there as well from the Saudi blockade. Kill civilians, starve the population into submission. Does this sound like any kind of democratization process? Does this sound like humanitarian war? Or is it a classic war of conquest? Now, Dick Cheney is out there saying that Russia's U.S. election interference should be considered an act of war. It's an act of war. We have to get on back. And, well, if you feel that way, Dick, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, watch your head climbing into that transport. We'll call Putin and tell him you're on your way to kick his butt all by yourself. And, of course, Putin's got nothing to worry about given Dick Cheney's history of inaccuracies with his shotgun. He's trying to shoot a goose, shot his lawyer instead. Now, John McCain is out there pushing the same thing. The Russian cyber intrusions are an act of war. When you attack a country, it's an act of war. And we have to make sure there's a price to pay. So basically what we have here is Dick Cheney and John McCain want you to go and kill people they don't like. Isn't that what they locked up Charlie Manson for doing? Sending other people out to kill people he didn't like? We're going to take a phone call. No, actually we're going to take a commercial break, then we're going to take a phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, on Dick Cheney and John McCain and the Clintons, the Bushes, it's all that oligarchy, man. You know, look at Chelsea Clinton. She got paid $26,000 for every minute for 58 minutes working on a project for NBC. Think about this. $26,000 for every minute for 58 minutes. And I want all Americans to see how much they get paid every minute.
Well, this is just a legal way of bribing a candidate to curry political favor. The same thing with book deals. Is you'll give somebody like a huge book deal with a huge advance, and the book doesn't really sell, and you wind up taking a loss. But it's a legal way of bribing people.
And Mike, what's the difference between an oligarchy and a plutocracy? Is it close to be the same?
It's pretty much the same. Both of them refer to systems where control and power are concentrated at the top. I think the only difference is that the oligarchy tends to be a little bit more open and honest, that they're doing it to enrich themselves at the expense of everybody else. Whereas a plutocracy sort of at least tries to maintain the illusion that they are working for the people. But there's a lot of crossover there. A tyrant by any other name would stink as bad.
This is true. And Mike, on Fox News, I was watching on YouTube, they showed, you know, like the Trump fights going on between the Antifa group, and there was one in Seaside, New Jersey the other day. I was like, wow, so it's actually, you know, it's moving. It's growing. Well,
some of these Antifa thugs are facing felony charges now for their actions. There was a video we actually have linked to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com where apparently one of these anti-Trump groups showed up fully armed with like major heavy weapons. And where are the gun grabbers when you really need them to be around? Because some of these weapons look like they were definitely over the top. But again, we're seeing a system where, you know, it's okay for them to behave this way, but not okay for you. And it's another sign that we have descended into tyranny and dictatorship.
Can this be the next shot heard around the world? You know, with them packing guns, we're packing guns, and obviously George Soros is pushing these people. And there's another group, Black Bloc. You ever heard of them?
Yeah, I heard about them.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is moving to date because, like one of your previous callers, I think yesterday said, you know, in May, they're going to be out in force, you know. I really think they are because that's where they're moving. They're going to use these foot soldier, brown shirt people to cause a lot of problems.
It almost feels like we're building towards something. It's not here yet. But just on a gut level, it just feels like they're pushing for some kind of a color revolution or a coup d'etat or a civil war or something. And be careful what you wish for. I finally decided I was going to arm up, so I bought myself a new gun. It's not really very effective, but it does have lots of pretty colored lights all over it. Anyway, we're going to let you go, Dustin. Need to get back to the news here. And before we talk about civil war, or world war, or any war indeed, there's a very hard historical reality we all need to keep in mind. When two nations or two groups decide to go into conflict with each other, both sides are convinced they will ultimately win because right is on their side, the gods favor them, whatever it's going to be. But as history has shown, half of those people are going to be wrong. Half of every leader who decides they want to go to war and are convinced they're going to win are wrong. Now, there's no question the U.S. has had a really good track record. Our military supporters like to say we've never lost a war, not counting Vietnam, but it's important to understand that the United States has not always won its wars all by itself. We were on the winning side in World War I, and we were on the winning side again in World War II. In fact, we sort of waited until it was obvious which side was going to win, and then we hopped on board. But there's a danger in overconfidence, and we're going to talk about that when we come back from this next break for our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the dangers of overconfidence. And again, to recap, every leader who takes his nation to war tells his people victory is certain, and history has shown half of them are going to turn out wrong. Just keep that in mind as you hear all this talk about war with Russia, war with China, war with Yemen, war with Syria. If you look how poorly the U.S. is performing, it's stuck in these quagmires in Iraq and Afghanistan. This was all supposed to be over and done with by 2008. So you have to be careful about being overconfident. And so there's this article over at Zero Hedge which is reminding us all of the story of Civil War General John Sedgwick. Now, he was a Union general, and during the 1864 Battle of Spotsylvania in Virginia, he was sitting on his horse on a ridgeline with his officers around him, observing distant Confederate troops, and one of his subordinates said, "Don't you think you should get under cover?" And Sedgwick said they couldn't hit an elephant at this distance, at which point he was shot in the face and died. Now, anybody who's a student of the Civil War knows this story because it is the perfect illustration of overconfidence and hubris. And yes, given that during the Civil War they were using round ball and smoothbore barrels, it was just a random lucky shot. But we need to keep that in mind because luck does come into it a great deal. During the war in the Pacific, during World War II, the U.S. won the Battle of Midway primarily through luck. The dive bombers literally stumbled over the Japanese carriers just when their decks were loaded with bombs. The deck was crowded, they couldn't launch or recover, and blew it up. Midway could have gone the other way. In fact, many years ago, I worked with a computer simulation of the Battle of Midway, and the Japanese kept winning that. It's not a given that we will win in these coming wars. In fact, I think we're probably going to lose because of the high cost and ill-suitability of our current generation of weapons. Now then, I was just coming back from commercial. I was looking on the TV. Apparently, along with calls for him to step down, Nunes is being challenged to reveal his sources for all this information about how Obama was spying on Donald Trump for political gain. And Nunes is saying, no, I need to keep my sources confidential. And, of course, the Democrats are going ballistic. Well, how are we supposed to know who to assassinate and dump in Fort Marcy Park if you won't tell us? All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Errol in the Netherlands. Errol, aloha. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello. Aloha, Mike. You speak with Errol from Netherlands. How are you?
I'm doing fine. What is on your mind today?
My mind is today, I listened to your radio show yesterday about vaccinations. And a very important thing I want you to notice, I can send you my own vaccination card that I had. My mother gave it to me. My mother is now 78 years old. And my mother gave it to me, she said, because you need to know this, because this is very important. It is the DKTP. It's a Detarifus, Kinkus, Tetanus, and Polio vaccine. Mm-hmm. And I got it, the first shot. It's registered. I can send you that.
Well, you can. Okay, two things. First of all, we do the vaccine news in hour number 3, and I got a whole bunch to share with everybody. Second of all, when you and I were younger, the vaccine companies were still liable for civil action if they made a mistake. And so back when you and I got the few vaccinations we got, they were still being very careful that they were safe and effective, and they weren't just dumping whatever they felt like into them. It's a very different story. All of the problems that we're seeing about vaccines in our current age are all a result of the indemnification of the vaccine industry against any kind of civil litigation. Now, some people are trying to break through that and establish a degree of recklessness that should void the indemnification, but it's a big political fight here, and it's all about the money. Anyway, listen, Errol, I'm going to let you go. If you want to call back in hour 3, go ahead, but I really want to stay sort of on topic here for this portion of the show here. Now, Russia is responding to all these allegations coming from U.S. war hawks that Russia could attack, Russia could do this, Russia could do that, by reminding everybody that right now at the moment, U.S. radars cover almost all the Russian territory. Russia is admitting they can't launch anything without the United States military knowing about it. And they're beginning to express a concern that these radars are so powerful, they actually pose a threat to non-military space flight in low Earth orbit, including the ISS. because these are very, very powerful radars. And a lot of the systems on satellites are just not built to resist being zorched by these beams. And they're urging a little bit of caution. Yes, have the radars, but just be aware that they could be a danger. We've got the ISS up there. China's getting ready to launch a manned space station. And there's all kinds of stuff in low Earth orbit that serves a benign purpose. Communication satellites, weather satellites, research satellites. And they're all at risk if they have one of these high-powered radar beams dwell on them long enough. It's going to cook the interior. Now then, as you know, Israel carried out an airstrike on Syria. Syria fought back. I'm sure Netanyahu was saying, what, they can shoot back? Are they allowed to do that? Are they allowed to shoot back? When did that happen? It's rattled the entire Middle East. It's reminded everybody that Israel is an aggressor into its neighboring countries. And everybody's very concerned about the escalating war of words between Israel, Syria, and Russia, leading to the announcement by Syria that if Israel bombs Syrian territory again, Syria will attack Israel with Scud missiles. And that could be a flashpoint for a regional war. And if that should happen, please keep in mind who started it. Our corporate media will say it's all Assad's fault or it's all Putin's fault. It isn't. Now then, they're really ramping up the propaganda about North Korea. Now, Vincent Brooks, he's the commander of the United States forces in Korea, is telling the Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop that North Korea has developed a rocket that could hit Canberra in a nuclear strike. Booga booga, booga booga, be afraid, be afraid. Can anybody think of a reason why North Korea would want to attack Australia? Are they like allergic to koalas? So why is the important part? It's like when they said Assad is gassing his own people. Oh, it's horrible. Why would he do that? I don't know. That's what tells you it's a lie here. Now, North Korea has carried out another rocket engine test. And the U.S. is wagging its finger. This could be part of a program to develop a new ICBM. Could also be part of their non-military space program. North Korea is launching satellites. In fact, they want to sell that as a service to other countries. Actually, I think the U.S. is just annoyed at Korea because we can't build our own rocket engines anymore. We have to buy them from Russia. And here's little North Korea able to build rocket engines when the United States no longer can. I think that's really what's going on here. A little bit of jealousy there. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Malcolm in New Mexico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Welcome from the land of enchantment. I have a question for you. I figure you could probably answer this because this was just something on my mind way back when I was living in Austin. I worked with someone who went to Israel. He was a Jew, and he went with a team of American people who were also Jewish. And they went around Israel, and they had somebody with Israeli IDF that toured with them for their safety and so forth. Mm-hmm. And every now and then he held something up in the air, and it was like a flashlight. It was during the day, and this friend of mine, he asked somebody, what was that all about? And he said that he's flashing a satellite. And I'm like, well, Israel doesn't have any satellites. So they go, oh, yes, they do.
Sure they do.
And I'm just wondering, it just occurred to me, if Israel's working with us and they work with the NSA a lot, they're probably using our satellites. And I'm thinking, wouldn't that be a way to get around the Fourth Amendment if you wanted to get information on somebody?
Well, that's what Echelon and Five Eyes have been doing since the 1980s. Each of the member countries of the Echelon program, they spy on the citizens of the other guys' countries, then they trade the data so that they can say, we're in compliance with the law. We're not spying on our own citizens. These other countries are spying on our citizens, and we can't enforce our privacy laws against them. It's an old scam, and they've been doing it. But Israel has unfiltered access to all of the take from the NSA, and we can presume probably other intelligence resources as well. But Israel does have its own satellites. They're launched by third-party nations or third-party countries, but Israel does have its own surveillance satellites.
So they can essentially spy on U.S. citizens for the NSA, and they don't have to worry about getting a judge's order.
Well, a lot of people overestimate what can be seen from a spy satellite in orbit. And most of the NSA spying is done with the built-in spy system in our tablets, cell phones, and computers. The use of imaging from orbit is to look for structures and stuff being built. Because of the atmospheric realities, there is no telescope in orbit that can look down and recognize a human on the ground. It's just too blurry to do. It's really very good. The adaptive optics technology that is now making its way into astronomy circles was actually developed for one of the later keyhole satellites. And along with that, there are the electronic intercept satellites like the Rhyolite series. But I think NSA does all their spying pretty much by just having taps into our phone lines, our computer lines. In fact, we have an article that we link to whatreallyhappened.com. Somebody has actually set up a website where if you go and visit and you click on it, it traces out all the routes of communication going from your computer and which ones are going through NSA listening stations.
But still, I mean, technically, you still have to get a judge's order if you want to listen to somebody. I mean, even though they are gathering all this information to go to San Antonio and Utah and so forth, if you want to zero in on someone, you still need a judge's order for that.
Well, that's what they keep telling us, but we're finding out more and more that people are accessing this intelligence inappropriately. The FISA court hardly ever refuses a request for a warrant. One notable recent exception being the warrant for Donald Trump. They turned that one down flat. So it's all illusion. I mean, the FISA court really doesn't do anything. It's not a safeguard, because anytime somebody says, I want to spy on Michael Rivero and Claire, his wife, the FISA court will say, yeah, sure, go ahead. It's not a problem. So they're trying to make it look like there's some kind of legal limits or restrictions or controls, but in point of fact, there aren't.
Oh, these are scary times we live in. Anyway, thanks a lot, Mike. I'll let you go. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to George in Texas, and then we're going to close the phone lines for a little while because I got a bunch of stuff to get to. George, what's on your mind?
Howdy, Mike. You know, hearing about the deep state, it's ingrained in all the bureaucracies, and they're pretty much ignoring what Donald Trump wants done in his political appointments at the cabinet level. And you know, the thing is, you hear about this continuity of government. Well, the truth is, you know, talking to some police officers, they're not going to go along with it in this continuity. I don't think the military is going to go along with it. And the continuity government depends on these elements in government to go along with it. And I don't really think they're going to go along with it.
Well, I said back before when it looked like Soros was trying to kick up a color revolution in this country, I said the part that he's missing is that for a color revolution to be successful, the general population must believe that the revolutionaries are organic from among their own people, and that they have a legitimate grievance, and that things will be better following the color revolution. It's never happened, by the way. Following all these color revolutions, everything gets worse for the targeted country, because it's not really a revolution, it's a coup d'etat and the installation of puppet rulers. So here in this country, nobody's buying into the color revolution, the Black Lives Matter, the Antifa, or anything. In fact, the more and more they behave like brown shirts, the more and more ordinary Americans are saying, these people are a problem, they are not a solution. And if they continue to push along this direction, I'm in agreement. They could trigger an outright civil war, and nobody's going to come out victorious from that.
Well, and also, too, I would recommend President Trump don't be in Washington early May, and plus, Congress, please adjourn for that first week in May. You know, because I heard they're going to be bringing in people to try to recreate the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution on May Day.
Well, maybe. We'll see how far they get, but I'll tell you right now, Donald Trump has got to stop being defensive. He's got to stop thinking that he can run the White House as a business. He's got to show some leadership. He's got to break out. He's got to go on the offense. And he's got to regain the initiative, or they are going to succeed in getting him out of office. That's very clearly what they want to do.
Well, thank you, Mike. I'll let you move on to the news.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to close the phone lines for a while. I'll announce when they're reopened again here. Let's talk about the economic news, because there's a major development out there where Russia and China are laying the groundwork for transactions within BRICS to be conducted in gold. No more ink and paper, no more fantasy money typed into a computer. They're basing their new transnational economic system on a gold basis. And the Federal Reserve is not going to like that one little bit. But the Federal Reserve has a more pressing problem. Do you remember back when Ron Paul created a bill to mandate a full and complete audit of the Federal Reserve? It just passed the House panel and is going to go to the floor of the Congress, and the Federal Reserve is absolutely screaming about it. The last time it looked like this bill could actually come up for a vote, the Federal Reserve literally threatened to crash the economy if anybody tried to audit their books and find out just how much they have made off the backs of the American people for the last 100 years. That's a number they do not want you to know. They're absolutely terrified when you find out how much these private central bankers have made from the enslavement of the American people through this public currency created out of thin air and loaned into circulation at interest. The American people would be furious, and they should be furious. So, we're going to come up here on another commercial break leading to the top of the hour. When we come on back, more interesting, financially linked, sort of, kind of, maybe it was a suicide, but I don't believe it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. So, do you remember Bernie Madoff with the loot? Incredibly rich man, co-founder of NASDAQ, classic money junkie. It still wasn't enough, so he set up this little Ponzi scheme, and he defrauded his investors and even his own employees out of something like $60 billion, much of which has never been recovered. And, of course, the taxpayers were forced to help make good on all of that. And apparently, Charles W. Murphy, hedge fund executive, supposedly leapt to his death in Midtown Manhattan yesterday. And he was 56 years old, fell 20 floors before he landed on the 4th floor terrace. Now, Murphy used to be an executive with Fairfield Greenwich Group, Bernie Madoff's biggest feeder fund, with $7 billion of clients' money invested. And here's where it gets kind of interesting. Murphy is the 4th person connected to Madoff to supposedly commit suicide. Isn't it interesting that the more crooked Wall Street becomes, the more and more we start seeing suspicious deaths? People would have the inside information to either find where certain money's disappeared to or lead to certain prosecutions, and they get horribly depressed. They're just so depressed, and they just fling themselves off the buildings. I'm not buying this one. And remember, in the United States, the legal process is, in all cases of unattended death, the presumption is homicide. Suicide must be proven. That's the way it normally works, and that's another reason why the death of Vince Foster was so suspicious. So many things wrong with the suicide story, but, oh yeah, it has to be suicide. You know, you have to prove he was murdered. No, homicide is the presumption under law. You have to prove suicide, and you failed to do it. Now then, do you remember when Trump came on in and was talking about revitalizing our economy? And one of the things he promised when he allowed these pipelines to start moving forward, he said, we're going to use American steel and American steel pipes, which we know are going to be able to resist leaking. And apparently Republicans are blocking or blocked the legislation to use American steel in order to benefit foreign steel companies. These Republicans, who are supposed to be on the side of Donald Trump, are out there saying, oh, we can't buy American. We'll harm those foreign steel companies. They're such really good friends of ours, and so we're going to keep the American steel industry down. We're going to leave all these American steel workers unemployed because really that would just not be fair to these foreign steel companies. Beginning to sound like liberals, aren't they? Over in Baltimore, their mayor just vetoed a bill that would have guaranteed a $15 an hour minimum wage, and proving that the corporate wing of the Democratic Party is alive and well. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back.